Hi, my name is Sylvia. I am a certified health coach and fitness trainer, and today I am excited to talk to you about my top 6 most common intermittent fasting myths. And the reason I picked this topic today is there's a lot of myths that I've been hearing over the last couple of years about intermittent fasting, and I wanted to take you through each one of these myths and debunk them. We're going to start with myth number 1, which is intermittent fasting requires you to skip breakfast. We've talked about that one quite often in my videos, but I wanted to address it again in the context of these intermittent fasting myths, since so many people equate intermittent fasting with skipping breakfast. However, intermittent fasting is not about skipping breakfast. It's about confining all of your eating to a specific time frame. And that time frame may require you to skip breakfast or it may not. And actually, my top intermittent fasting methods don't typically require you to skip breakfast, except possibly one, depending on how you go about it. And if they do, it's not every single day. And if you want to know more about the intermittent fasting methods that I tend to recommend, don't forget to check the blog post. The link is in the description below. I give more details there. But here, I just want to go over the top intermittent fasting myths quickly. Myth number 2, women should avoid intermittent fasting. I mean, I used to believe that one myself because the first time I tried intermittent fasting about 10 years ago, I hated it. It didn't work out well for me. I didn't feel good at all. And to me, it made sense. It's not good for women. It doesn't work for women. That's why it didn't work for me. Now, fast forward 10 years later, I rediscovered intermittent fasting in my 40s. I tried intermittent fasting again because I was desperate. I was struggling with mysteriously gaining weight, and it seemed to me like I had to feel hungry all the time to just not gain weight. So, like, losing weight seemed impossible. But what happened this time around is I did intermittent fasting differently. I started by becoming fat adapted, which will make your experimenting with intermittent fasting a lot easier, and you will be able to listen to your body's cues because you won't be a slave to your food cravings, to your appetite. And so that's the first step I did. And then instead of just going for the usual 16-8 intermittent fasting method, I tried the other methods that I suggest, like the eat, stop, eat method, for example. And it was suddenly a new ball game. Intermittent fasting was a lifesaver for me. Now, there are some things to keep in mind for women to ensure that you fast safely. And one of the things would be to avoid stressing your body too much. Intermittent fasting is a form of stress on your body. So I don't recommend that you fast every single day. And also, I don't recommend you add too many other stresses as you are practicing intermittent fasting. For example, don't cut your calories too much because calorie restriction is another form of stress on your body. Don't limit your carb intake, because that would be another form of stress on your body, and limit your exercise routine to something that's maybe more gentle, and don't go crazy working out 1 or 2 hours every single day. Start slow and steady. Another thing that women should keep in mind whenever they practice intermittent fasting is to pay attention to their cycles. And it is very typical for women to notice that they crave more carbs, they have more appetite during the last 2 weeks, or at least the last week of their menstrual cycle. And there's a reason for that. Your body needs more carb, your body needs more energy during that time of the month. And you should pay attention to those signs and honor that. Okay, so myth number 3, intermittent fasting slows down your metabolism. You don't need to worry about intermittent fasting slowing down your metabolism. It will not do that. On the contrary, some studies suggest that it will actually increase your metabolism because it's a form of stress on your body. And that's what happens when you stress your body. Typically, it increases your metabolism for short term, obviously. And actually, I think it's a good time to address something very interesting that I read as I was researching for this video and the blog post that comes with it. I often make the comparison between fasting and exercise because both are forms of stress that your body has to overcome. And I was reading a quote by the senior investigator of the National Institute on Aging, and that's in the United States. And I thought that what he had to say was fascinating. Here's what he said. There are several theories about why fasting provides physiological benefits. The one that we've studied a lot and designed experiments to test is the hypothesis that during the fasting period, cells are under mild stress and they respond to the stress adaptively by enhancing their ability to cope with stress and maybe to resist disease. There is considerable similarity between how cells respond to the stress of exercise and how cells respond to intermittent fasting. That's something you always need to keep in mind when you think of intermittent fasting. Myth number 4, intermittent fasting causes nutritional deficiencies. I often hear that myth as well, and particularly when it comes to intermittent fasting methods that require you to skip more than one meal, like the OMAD method, for example. However, something to keep in mind is that the issue at stake here is not intermittent fasting itself and the fact that you are restricting your eating window, but it's about how many calories you're consuming. So whether you're intermittent fasting or just using calorie restriction to reach your weight loss goals, you'll have the same opportunity to consume all the vitamins and minerals that you need to sustain optimal health. The issue here is to ensure that you're consuming enough calorie. You don't want too great of a calorie deficit while you are intermittent fasting. Myth number 5, intermittent fasting is a diet culture fad. This is one of the most infuriating intermittent fasting myths in my opinion, because humans have gone through cycles of feast and famine throughout all of history. Meanwhile, since fasting has become a fad, obesity has reached epidemic proportion globally. So I think the issue may not be fasting, but the lack of fasting in our society. Fasting is a natural way to reset your hunger hormones, improve your insulin sensitivity, and most people will find it very difficult to keep their appetite under control unless they go through some cycles of famine. And our last myth, which is myth number 6, intermittent fasting makes you overeat later. If you have any experience with becoming fat adapted using intermittent fasting, you will almost find this one funny because you know how being metabolically flexible decreases your appetite and your sugar cravings, and it makes it a lot harder to overeat. So, what intermittent fasting does is that it teaches your body to switch from using glucose for energy to using ketones for energy with ease. As you fast, your body runs out of glycogen, start producing ketones using your fat cells. And when you go through your refeeding period, then you start using glucose again for energy. So you're switching like this back and forth, and you achieve ketosis on a regular basis, at least a few times a week, depending on how frequently you practice intermittent fasting, and you will not find yourself overeating. In fact, there are studies that show that even intermittent fasting methods that require you to fast a lot longer, like 36 hours with alternative fasting, for example, will not cause you to overeat later. Instead, you will most likely decrease your calorie consumption during your eating window. So that's it. The point of this video about the most common intermittent fasting myth is not to say that everyone should practice intermittent fasting. Rather, it is to say that no one should claim that everyone should avoid intermittent fasting. Each of us is very unique. We all have different needs. And as we take ownership of our health, we discover that some things may work at one time, they may not work at another time. So we have to keep a flexible mindset and listen to our bodies in the process. Enjoy the journey, and thank you for watching.